My name is Michael Renaud, and I am one of the 2025 Public Life Fellows. I'm also the managing editor of The Dispatch, a Washington-based news outlet that covers politics, policy, and culture. I also coordinate, edit, and occasionally write for a weekly newsletter called Dispatch Faith that covers how faith and religion intersect with the public square, so very much the same kind of things we're talking about here this week. I am here to introduce our last panel of the day, Artificial Intelligence, Promises and Perils. You probably noticed those of us introducing these panels and speakers have been asked to explain why we care about these things. I guess my pat answer as a journalist is that if folks like you start to get your news that's produced and edited by computer chips based in data centers in suburban Atlanta, it makes it hard for people like me to keep putting braces on my kids' teeth and getting them through college. But the deeper reason that I care about artificial intelligence, simply put, is just because I'm a human. If you heard Megan Sullivan speak about this earlier today, you know that this technology is asking profound questions about what it means to be an image bearer of God, what our responsibilities are to bring certain technology to bear. And so with that, I'm honored to introduce the speakers on our next panel. It's going to be moderated by CCPL's Director of Research, Alex Arnold, whom you've seen earlier today. Discussing this with him is Jimmy Lin, the Chief Scientific Officer at Freenome, a cancer diagnostic biotech company in the San Francisco Bay Area. He also leads two nonprofits, including the Rare Genomics Institute, which helps patients with rare disease access certain technologies, and the Center for Ethical Intelligence, an AI think tank for moral reasoning and value alignment. Joining him is Molly Kinder, a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, where she leads the Artificial Intelligence and Emerging Technology Initiative project. Kinder's scholarship has been cited in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and several other publications. Before Brookings, she led research on AI and work at New America, co-founded a $200 million social impact fund, and also served in the Obama administration. And also on the panel is Dr. Brandon Rickabaugh, an award-winning author and a former philosophy professor. He's the founder of NOVUS, where he explores questions about human consciousness, knowledge, emotion, and virtue formation, particularly in relation to the cultural and spiritual implications of artificial intelligence. Brandon is passionate about translating his research into frameworks and practices to cultivate wisdom, renew public imagination, and foster human flourishing. And Brandon is also a 2025 Public Life Fellow, so I can personally attest that he's also a very, very cool guy. Join me in welcoming our panel.
Well, here we are again, like a bad dream. I'm back. Sorry. Anyway, thanks for sticking through, guys. It's a home stretch. So I'm pleased as punch that we're going to be able to talk to these people. They're really amazing. We had a really vigorous discussion last night as sort of a pre-game, and hopefully you can bring some of that energy to this panel discussion. As a housekeeping note, we're going to reserve about 15 to 20 minutes at the end of this session for members of the audience to submit questions using the Whova app. So go ahead, and if you haven't downloaded the app, go ahead and do that. And if you've got questions as the panel discusses the topic of AI, go ahead and drop them in. You can also upvote questions that you think are particularly interesting and insightful. So we've already introduced our panelists. Thank you for taking the time to be here. Very honored. I want to start off and just ask each of you kind of two very basic questions. Sort of what excites you about AI, one, and then also what worries you about AI. So since I at least try to be gentlemanly, we'll go ladies first. So
I have a strap line that I think we should embrace the wonder of this technology and address the worry. So your question goes right to the heart. I focus on work and workers, and I'm excited about the reality that AI is something that can enable us to do things that we never thought we could. So Steve Jobs had a famous line talking about the computer back in the 80s, I believe it was, that computers are like bicycles of the mind. And he pulled that from a story in Nature that looked at how efficient people were and animals were at locomotion, at movement. And humans were like terribly inefficient. except when they're on a bicycle. So the idea is like, the computer at that thought was like, it's like a bicycle for the mind. It lets you do more. AI is like that a million times over. It's incredible what it can teach people to do, coach people to do, allow them to, express their talents in exciting ways. That's what excites me about AI when it comes to work. I think the potential of it is if it can really help people with less opportunity get opportunity. What worries me is that I don't think we're living up to that at all. I think AI also can be something that can substitute for us at work. It can be used to de-skill, to replace, and make jobs actually worse. And I think ultimately which direction we take is a choice that we'll make.
Great. Dr. Linton.
My training has been in computational biology, and we've been seeing AI's impact since even before the human genome. The fact that we can start analyzing hundreds of thousands of genes for every individual at one time, and we can start making sense of this has been amazing. I keep saying this I think that cancer can be a solved problem within our lifetimes. I think that many of the rare diseases that nobody's even researching can be affected and be addressed now with AI. So there's sort of amazing promise of things that, because we just didn't have enough people, enough scientists to generate enough data to be able to understand that. So at least within the biological sciences, it's a very exciting and promising time. In terms of the dangers, well, just the same way that AI can be used for great good and great sciences, as more and more people use it in different ways, there are infinite ways for it to also cause harm. We've seen some already with some, with relationships, relational chatbots, with suicides. This is going to just increase in pervasiveness. And right now, the incentives for these companies right now, unfortunately, is an arms race to be able to build as fast as you can. And when you're trying to do things fast, you don't have as much time to build the right guardrails there. So things will have errors, things will be prone to break in the tech field where we talk about sort of shipping things fast and iterating. But with some of these technologies, the impact could be very significant there. And once we have AI designing itself and iterating and potentially making the speed so much faster, there could be a possibility of great harm as well.
That's great. I think the way that I would put it as a philosopher would just be, I think that AI is excellent in very specified tasks that have to do with the handling of the right kind of information, the right kind of data. And so predicting when there are going to be certain natural disasters, but not just that, when the natural disasters happen, understanding and predicting the different way the resources can get distributed, for example. Brilliant technology there. The worry, though, is that we'll start to look like data ourselves, or we'll start to look at everything as if it's a data point itself. And so a worry, a concern that I have, and this just comes from the history of technology, is that we'll think that technology is just a tool. And that's very naive, in the sense that just a technology coming into existence carries a moral weight. You can use it for good, you can use it for bad, but it itself brings with it a moral character into the situation, and we need to be very mindful of that.
Wonderful. So I also just want to encourage you guys to interact with each other. So as you say,
I want to say you have the best. I think the thing that if you polled people, the number one thing we're most excited about with AI is medical discoveries in curing cancer. So I just keep going. Let's make sure all the good that you can do, because it's going to make up for some of the bad that is going to happen in other spots.
So Molly, you've been doing great path-breaking work on kind of the potential for AI to really disrupt, for the good, but also for the ill, the labor force. And you come at this not with like a purely kind of, economist's mindset, but you also bring a very deep and passionate Christian faith. There's like a theology of work that underlies the way both your motivation, but also the way you're thinking about the first order issues. And I'd love for you to kind of unpack some of the earlier remarks you just made about the potential, or rather the potential to lose the potential to leverage AI to actually benefit those that are sort of lower on the labor scale. So I'd love for you to just sort of share some of that.
Sure. So my day job at the Brookings Institution is I'm an economist. I'm an expert on this stuff. I just put out an influential paper a few weeks ago looking at the labor market data. So I do your kind of wonky, just straightforward expert work. But I also come at this with a deep passion for workers and for people. And I'm not a traditional Brookings scholar in the sense that all of my work over the last 6 years at Brookings has very much centered on people. And so when I approach my this incredible opportunity to work at an influential think tank with a big platform, I have all the evidence and I have all the data, but also I very much center it on people. And I think that approach itself is influenced by my Catholic faith growing up and sort of social justice. And the more I've gotten into AI and workers, the more I've recognized we are facing something that feels unprecedented. We're barreling toward this future that no one can totally predict. I think there's extraordinary wisdom in looking backwards at the last 1,000 years of Christian, our theological approach. What does the Bible say? What does our Christian ethics say about this? So the more I've sort of gone into this, the more I have found unbelievable relevance and resonance of learning from that Christian tradition. And my Christian tradition since birth has been in Catholicism. So I'm very much influenced by the Catholic view of the dignity of work. I was at the Vatican last week. I had the opportunity to be part of a Vatican seminar on AI. And one of the things I talked about was how much wisdom there is in this Catholic conception, which is really a Christian conception on the dignity of workers, but the dignity also of working. And it really feels like that comes into stark contrast with a lot of the vision we're hearing from Silicon Valley, that the purpose of this technology, that this race we're on, this AGI, this artificial general intelligence, now maybe it's ASI or some other term, that a lot of the way Silicon Valley has framed this is when you get an AI so good, it's better than people at work. And there has been this framing that actually maybe we're better off as a society if AI is so good, none of us have to work. And what I've framed is I worry that that promises almost this new Garden of Eden where Adam and Eve aren't put on, instead of being put on this earth for the purpose of tilling the land and working, it's what, is it leisure? Like, where are we going to get our purpose? So I think there's a really strong tension there that I think Christian faith and theology and sort of a Christian notion of working is a helpful way to sort of poke holes at this techno-utopianism. And then the other point, which I'm really glad you raised, is I've been very moved and inspired by Pope Francis. Some of his writing has been just so visionary on AI, and of course Pope Leo now is taking up that mantle. But there was a line in one of his, I think it was Laudato Si, one of his recent encyclicals, that said that AI could be both good and bad. There's possibility, there's peril. Ultimately, we should judge it on how much it lifts up the least among us. And I think that is not the way we're thinking about AI generally. And it's really been a sort of guiding call for me to think about policy interventions and big ideas. So something that I've been working on is really trying to develop a pilot and some thinking around how can we be thinking in different ways about how workers with the least education, the least opportunity, who in our data are using these tools the least, how can we make sure they can harness these tools to enable them to do even better paying or better quality or more meaningful work? And I think there's a market failure. This is not the way Silicon Valley is addressing this. It's not going to happen on its own. But I think as Christians and as Catholics, I think there's a guiding principle of making sure this is something really that's going to lift us up from the bottom up that we can realize with attention.
I like to often sort of point to this moment with AI, similar to what happened in the field of physics when they started to think about the Big Bang. There's a big discussion of, is there really a Big Bang? Well, if there was a Big Bang, that means there's a start. And what does that mean? So a lot of the physicists at the time start really sort of going into philosophy and thinking beyond sort of pure empirical science. In the same way, the computer scientists are coming to that moment. They're thinking about AGI, ASI, and thinking about alignment and how do we, there's the trolley problem. Should it run over this little child that has a lot of opportunity, or this old person? I hate these problems there. But they feel like, you know what? They're developing this being of sorts that they want to imbue it some sort of values and morality to be able to do that. So there's efforts to try to do that. The first thing that they tried, as you know from sort of ChatGPT, they take all of human knowledge on the internet. And they trained it, including all the Reddit posts, including, right, all the, everything that's there. And it turns out that, you know what, if you just use all of the things on the internet, it's not very moral and oftentimes not very ethical, right? So this is what philosophers talk about, again, sorry, I'm saying some, the is versus ought problem, right? Now, there's a mismatch of what we think morals and values are and what the data shows. So the computer scientist first is like, oh no, we can't just use data. And I jokingly say that, you know what? They've discovered the fall. That humans aren't, morally righteous to it, then you can't just take the internet. So they're trying to figure out what's sort of helpful in terms of data because they want to have their systems in a certain way. The second thing they've discovered is very interesting, and this is, again, not my field, but more in the sociology field. They have this term called weird. That these values are weird, which stands for Western, educated, industrial, rich, democratic. And people in these areas in Silicon Valley are realizing, you know what? Our values are not reflective of global human values there. Oh no, we are not the sort of the final arbiter of morality, and they are looking out, and that's why there's conversations with the Catholic Church, with faith leaders, that in terms of, of many of these people in the AI labs are actually very thoughtful. They want to build what's good, and they realize that their own values is insufficient. So there's a movement now of, again, these conversations between these sort of AI labs and the faith groups of like, how do we leverage the wisdom from the millennia of thinking of ethical thought and social theory to be able to help. So I think there's an amazing opportunity right now within the computer science, AI, Silicon Valley, that they're realizing the depths of their fall. They're realizing that their own system of morality is not the end-all and be-all. And this is a time for the church to be in conversation with these builders of AI to really sort of think through from what people would like to say, first principles, always first principles of what truly it means to be human, what truly to be good, what do we want, not only in general terms, but down to evals and statements, a code of what that is. And when you're forced to write these things down, these conversations need to be very specific. So there's been an amazing conversation that's now happening in Silicon Valley, sort of talking about, moral philosophy, about ethics that you would never think that would happen before.
So I like what you're saying. If I understand you right, you're saying philosophers. We need more philosophers. And so I'll be the philosopher. Yeah. So I'll be the philosopher now. And just, right, we're supposed to push back on things. And so the claim that we've got all of human knowledge on the internet is just false, right? In particular, and let me back up. This is important because when Jesus talks about what salvation is, there's one place in the Bible where he says this, in John 17:3, and he talks about it as a form of knowledge, right? This is what eternal life is, that they may know you. And that's not the sort of thing that you can get just by, it's not captured in data, let's put it that way. Or the way philosophers talk about it, it's not reducible to propositions, right? It's not gonna work that way. And so whatever it is that you're going to get out of AI, it won't be able to get at the things that make us uniquely human. And if you go then, shift then to this issue about work, what I love about this is now it's going to push on us to understand that in our hearts we've been not set up to cherish the distinction between an occupation and a vocation. And those are not the same thing. What AI can bring in terms of, these really wonderful goods. I will use AI for all sorts of things. But I won't want to use it for the sorts of things that it has to do with replacing the value of a human person or their dignity. Now, what we're at is a time where we're realizing we've not thought well about that, or we've forgotten about this. And another mistake would be, and I think you were alluding to this too, is that these problems have been worked on for a long time. Plato had this argument that the written word was going to make us stupid. because we were going to forget how to remember, right? So there's arguments that have to do with the history of the church too. I think Jesus had a lot to say about these things. So don't give up on the idea that there's something unique about what we know as human persons carrying something. Or when I've taught on like the problem of evil, how can we understand how it is that God relates to the suffering in the human world? I'll often tell people, we'll go and sit with the woman in the pews who spent 6 years caring for her husband dying slowly of cancer. She's got a PhD in that. And that's not going to be the sort of thing that you can put online, and it's not going to be the sort of thing that you'll get from an intimacy bot, let's say.
So I just finished my MA from Reformed Theological Seminary, where I specifically look at ways of Imago Dei, right, image of likeness of God, from more Reformed tradition. So Herman Bavinck is the theologian I looked at in terms of how it relates to AI. And oftentimes, I think we fall into the trap of really simplifying, reducing humanity to very simple attributes, right? And you know, in this sort of from modernity, right, and humanism, the intellect has been held of high esteem, and that's like, oh, that's reflective of our image of God. And there's actually a lot of theological discussion about that, because, right, the disability literature, right, are they more or less in the image of God, right? I work with children with rare diseases that will have zero economic contribution to the world in terms of how that's measured, but they have immense value and worth, and we should sort of work on them. So I think what we need to really is recover what the full extent of sort of image of likeness beyond sort of just the intellect, right? There is relational, right, of how it's, you know, within the Trinity and within God and us, between man and woman. In Genesis, one of the first things we'll do is a calling in terms of God giving us to be participants in the care of the garden, right? That vocation is not something that can be replaced. Is even if I have a clone of me, they're exactly the same. If I'm not called, that relationship with my son is different, right? So that relationship and calling. There's embodiment, similar to that Megan sort of talked about, but more on our body, the incarnation. Original righteousness, like our image of God reflects our righteousness that God gave us. Yes, there's been marred since the fall, but there's such richness in this sort of image of God that as we sort of recover more of this, just because computers can add and subtract or answer sort of knowledge questions, I don't think we should not be threatened by that really sort of taking away for what it means to be human.
I would push back on that slightly. In the sort of conversations about how AI or technology could impact work, if I was on the stage exactly 3 years ago, so ChatGPT came out November 2022, so 3 years ago would have been like weeks before ChatGPT came out, I would have said, sure, computers can do some routine cognitive tasks, they're very helpful, maybe they could do my taxes, but never going to be empathetic, never going to be creative like human, never persuasive. It's never going to be as smart as a doctor, and it's never going to have the bedside manner of the best doctor. These were all things that we assumed were uniquely human, and they were not at threat from technology. And I, right now, could give you 10 studies for each of those characteristics or examples of the ways Gen AI has shocked us. I mean, I wrote a case study of the Hollywood writers as my first case study because it was so surprising to me that it was NYU alums with the most incredible creative talents that were most worried about their jobs from AI. It's better than doctors at diagnosing diseases, incredible mimicking of bedside manner. A lot of studies show that when people don't know whether it's AI or not, they prefer responses from AI to a doctor or a nurse. When ChatGPT Advanced Voice Mode came out exactly a year ago, I spent 30 days every day speaking to ChatGPT in this voice mode for the hour you're allotted, role-playing jobs that I could not have imagined 2 years earlier an AI could do. A hospice nurse giving me advice how to tell my daughters their grandmother was dying. I asked it to be an incredibly patient nurse. I pretended I was a 95-year-old, very confused patient in the hospital. Incredible. I mean, I wrote down in my notes, limitless patience with patience. Persuasive. I mean, extraordinary human-like mimicking roles. So I still think humans are going to be better than an AI at forming real relationships. But I think we fool ourselves to think of AI as just like another clunky computer that doesn't threaten some of the things that make us uniquely human. We are going to have to grapple as a society with where we put the guardrails, including through work. I mean, an AI might be able to be our therapist or our teacher or our doctor or our hospice social worker, but should we? You know, where are we going to put some of those rules at? Because I do worry that AI is evolving in such astonishing ways that it really does call into question, what does it mean to be human? Where do we want to put those lines up? Because we used to be able to lean on, well, being human is all these things that we really value, and also technology can't do it anyways. And now the question is, like, the technology is getting better at it.
I'll push back even harder then. So,
Lots of shoving.
Let's go.
and this is where I get in trouble, but I'm fine with getting in trouble. My dissertation was on the nature of consciousness and what sort of things can be conscious.
I didn't say it was conscious, by the way. I just said it's mimicking humans in these interactions.
But, okay, so that's different. And then you want to ask the question, though, do I want a therapist or do I want something that mimics a therapist? Right, so we want to make sure that we're inconsistent there. So,
this is me, again, as I was explaining, I asked AI to role play. So for instance, I asked it to pretend it was a priest giving me last rites, and that's where ChatGPT said, no, you can't do that. But I didn't think it was a priest, but I'm saying, like, what can an AI mimic so well that on the other side, I might be fooled by it?
right, and that's,
So I'm not saying it's conscious.
Yeah.
I'm saying we might be now left with decisions as a society of
yes.
what do we think is acceptable, given this is just a mimic.
right, because it gets dangerously close to, is it okay to have a narcissist as my therapist? Someone that could pretend really, really well to care about me, but not. Right? So I think that all of the evidence suggests that AI is not conscious, and and you've got to get clear on what kind of AI you're talking about, but also really good in-principle reasons to think it never could become conscious. The danger, though, is that we'll think that it is. And so just the label artificial intelligence is a problem. I don't think that they can think. I also, I won't even get into a weird part where I think robots actually can't even walk, because you need to have intentional states to walk, and that's different than tripping. But these are really, really important, because if you think that they could be conscious, you could think that they care about you, and you could think that they're there for you. We might get into this, in a moment, but the dangerous threat that we have with what's being called now spirit tech or faith tech, where people are starting to report that they have deeper religious experiences with an AI that are more transformative than they've ever had at a church. And that comes with this assumption that they're being seen by that. Now, I want to ask, well, why are we the kinds of people to where that would be a default mode to go to? And the answer, I think, is that we've mechanized ourselves. We don't know what it's like to see another person as a real human person, be seen as a real human person, see God, be seen by God as a human person. It's a rarity. And now discussions about AI in that context the danger, I think, there becomes more obvious. The other thing I would say, and this is tied to the issue about employment and jobs, is that the discussion about AI has already made huge philosophical assumptions. If you just pay attention to the language of how the debates go, it's already in economic terms. Now, if you already have a discussion that's in economic terms, non-economic answers will make no sense. And so if you're going to start talking about deep meaning, that's going to be in standard, it's not going to translate into the standard language of economy. Now, this is going to be a real problem, because we're dealing with the value of human persons, what provides or undermines the dignity of human persons, what it means to have relationships with people. And we've got to resist just the language that we're given to talk about AI in terms of mere economics.
I would even go a step more. It's not just economics. It's just any capability, right? So without a doubt, AI is going to be seemingly more capable in terms of being empathic, knowledgeable, right? And if we measure humanness by just capabilities, if that's the only metric, right, that's where we're going to have some problems, right? Because AI will just be as capable, right? There's a Black Mirror episode. I don't know if people watch Black Mirror. It's very dystopian. But this person ordered a clone of this woman of her dead husband and activated it. And then this clone looked exactly like her husband, spoke exactly like her husband, knew all the information of her husband, right? So in terms of the capabilities, it even touch and feel is exactly the same.
Oh, but is it though?
But it is not, exactly.
Okay, so it's not. So we can't say that it provides.
No, that's what I'm saying. That's exactly my point. Yeah. We agree with you. Yeah. We agree.
No pushing back.
Husband, she
Pushing
ends up turning him off because she like misses him so much. But this is not, even though it looks like, walks like, talks like, not a dog, her husband, but it is not, right? So it's not just mere capabilities that define this sort of personhood there. So it's important for us not to just sort of, because AI has these capabilities, then it also, has these things that we describe uniquely create an image of God.
So let me just pull a bunch of these threads together that we're weaving into a beautiful tapestry of knowledge and understanding.
No, I want to push back on that.
Okay. You want to tear my tapestry apart. That hurts my feelings.
Sometimes you got to bring levity to this.
I know.
It's heavy.
I know.
It's heavy.
Yeah, it is heavy. So like we're like in terms of the Delta framework that Megan Sullivan presented, it seems like the two values that we're kind of hammering on in this discussion right now are dignity, and especially the distinctively Christian conceptions of dignity, and also embodiment in particular ways, right? Like a simulacrum of your dead husband or a simulacrum of a therapist is not a therapist, right? Exactly. And I think the moral maybe to draw here is that with respect to those two values, that's where Christians can actually kind of be on the leading edge, right? 100%. Where, not to be too much of an economist, but where Christians have certainly a comparative advantage, I would argue an absolute advantage, in terms of being able to articulately talk about these things and defend them and commend them to audiences that frankly are kind of dying for this sort of stuff, right? So, I mean, I think this is all great. What I want to kind of do here is sort of pull on one of these threads about how AI is going to really maybe change us, maybe for the better, we can talk about that, but also change us maybe for the worse. So I've got some interesting polling data that I pulled from this project at Elon University, which does not have anything to do with Elon Musk. I had to kind of like remember that Elon University is a prestigious university in North Carolina, not anything to do with Elon Musk. But so they've been doing some interesting polling on technology issues for a long time. And on September 17th, they released a report on some polling data they took earlier in the spring. And the question was something along the lines of, on a range of kind of human capabilities, so we've been talking a little bit about capabilities, is AI going to have sort of more negative, a neutral, a kind of mixed, or more positive effect on human capabilities? So just some statistics to share here. So 55% of respondents to this poll said that it's going to have a more negative effect on our social and emotional intelligence. It's 53% more negative on our ability to think deeply about complex topics. 49% a more negative effect on our sort of individual agency, sense of individual agency. More negative when it comes to moral judgment and empathy. And then 45% more negative effect in terms of our creative capacity. So Pew actually has a statistic where it's 53%, so a little bit higher. So I'd love to get your take on sort of this issue. Like, here's a blunt way to put it. What do you think the net effect is going to be of engagement with these AI tools on our human capacities? To relate to one another, to think deeply about complex topics, to be agents in the world.
And then I also want to be able to push back.
Good, yeah, you just studied me up to push back. So no matter what I say.
Contrarians.
I'm actually really glad you brought this up, because in the Pew polling that just came out, the US is the most negative country in terms of how our public feels about whether AI is going to be good or bad in the world. I mean, there's some others close behind, but I've been thinking deeply about why that is, and I think there's a few things I'd point out. One, I think when I talk to parents in particular, everyone is just reeling still from the impacts of social media. So I think we have a countrywide PTSD from how negative that experience has been, which has also resulted in not only do we have as a country and as a public very low trust in the tech companies to do the right thing, we also have no trust that government is actually going to be there to fix it. When I think about work, I think we're still reeling as a country from the negative effects of deindustrialization. And again, that erodes trust that as a country, we're going to be able to grip this and help workers transition. And I think, so these are sort of things that we've just happened that I think have eroded trust that this force is going to come and it's going to end up being good, even if there's possibility for good. And I think on this stage we'd all agree there's huge possibilities. Even just the question around, is it going to be good for your thinking or bad for your thinking? I mean, I think all the evidence suggests it's how you use it. I mean, I use it, I'm a think tank scholar at Brookings. I use it all the time to learn new things, expand my curiosity, get smarter. I don't ask it to write my papers for me. I ask it to help me think. In fact, I have another draft of a New York Times essay that I've been writing, and some of the ideas I'm putting out there that I've never seen anyone else put out came from extensive back and forth of curiosity, probing with AI and getting smarter about something. It can be really good, or it can just be cognitive offloading. All of these things, creativity, it's all going to be about choices we make. And I think there's right now, we have a lot of pessimism as a country. And because of these things, and I would also, I mean, I know we have you representing the best of Silicon Valley with curing cancer, but I think generally speaking, what we're hearing out of Silicon Valley does not leave us feeling full of faith and optimism. Most of the rhetoric is about replacing people, not about making them better in their jobs. Parents, I know there's a worry about our success narrative. How do we even train our kids for the future? How do we keep them safe? It feels very...
Could you say what the success narrative is, just in case?
Sure, so sorry, I think in this country, and I think about, you know, my grandparents who came here were uneducated immigrants, and this is the American story. If you work hard, save money, your kids do well, they go to college, they go to school, they're going to do better than you. This is sort of our American story, that if you're, and we fail it all the time, we don't give every child in this country a fair opportunity, but there is a sense that in order to achieve the American dream, everyone has the same formula. You study hard and you go to school and you get the best possible job. I've been interviewing college students for this new report I'm writing for Brookings around early career workers and the risk with AI. And I say, what does the American dream mean to you? And most of them say, you know, we're here because we want to get a secure job. You know, life is expensive. We're worried about whether we're going to support our kids. That's why we're going to be a lawyer or an engineer or go into consulting. And I think AI is scrambling terribly the success narrative. Like, no parent feels confident that we know the formula for success. And that's really disorienting to us as a country. So these are very existential questions. And I think there is a sense that people are not feeling very full of confidence. And I think that's a really important thing for those of us thinking about faith and spirituality to enter this into. People are looking for guidance. They don't know how to navigate this. They don't trust the tech companies. They don't think we're going to get answers from Washington, and Washington is not giving them hope, a lot of indications of hope. Where are they going to how are they going to navigate this? So I can't predict the future. I think there's every possible way there's a good version of this, and there's an equally bad version. And I think the sense of pessimism comes from our lack of confidence that the national project that is America right now is managing this well.
Yeah, and I think what you'd say, though, is that it is certainly the individual level sort of up to you, how you engage it. And then in aggregate, at the national level, it's, you know, up to us in some sense. And so
maybe,
yeah.
But I think the reason why people don't feel confident is just take social media.
Yeah.
What parent feels they have the tools to make sure their kids are doing this safely? So there is this sense this force is happening outside our control. And obviously we all want to make choices, but the tech is moving so fast. Who's keeping up with it? I really don't think people feel empowered right now that they alone can manage these forces. And it's potentially putting vulnerable things they hold most dear, their family, their livelihood, their own sort of connection with community and society. I don't mean to paint such a dark picture, because I actually use the technology all the time, and I see huge reasons that this could go right. But I think we have a national sense of pessimism that we as a country are going to manage this. And I'd love for someone else to push back if
Yeah, so
I think what you were saying was really great, and I think we can go deeper too. So this,
didn't push back.
I didn't push back.
Not a philosopher.
Oh man.
there's no pot coming.
I know, yeah. So then going back and looking at our history is really, really important here. So this worry about job scarcity comes from a view of what education is, and that's about getting a job.
Yes.
That's not what education is for. You can go into a university and get a degree and not become educated, right? So, and this gets back to this issue about knowledge and what knowledge is and why it's really important and why we really need to talk differently about what AI is and isn't. Now, I'm very optimistic in the sense that what AI is doing, some people will say AI is a mirror, and that I think is too passive to think about it. AI is not a mirror in the sense that it's more of like a house of mirrors, in the sense of it's got distortions in it.
A fun house.
The fun that are usually very scary. Yeah, AI can be fun. I love debating with AI, right? Like, yeah. I'm 17 years old and my mom gets mad at me for this. Pretend to be her. And then I just go back and forth. Right? You want to do this?
That's a very
You're all
revealing
gonna
comment.
you're all going to go do this. That'll be the only thing for me that you'll take away. But what AI can do is or I shouldn't say AI. This moment that we're in right now is something that Jesus dealt with. So the way that we look at education as the sort of thing that we check off to get a job is now, again, in sort of economic or mechanistic terms. Now, I can't give the full spiel here, so I'll give you a little bit to think about. I think that the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount is very relevant to the time that we've got right now. I think that Jesus' argument there is about technology. It's just a religious technology. And it's the kind of technology that depersonalizes people, right? You're in or out of God's kingdom because of your body being this way, right? Some sort of mechanism, right? Something that doesn't have to do with you as a person. And his answer, his response to that is to say, no, you're a person, I see you, and the Lord sees you as a person too. Jesus has a philosophy of technology. He has the answer that we've got to this. When I give talks, I'll share the doom and gloom, and then I'll come to the conclusion of, you know what, we have the answer to this. And it's going to be something that's going to be very, very challenging for us. It's going to be about taking the Spirit of God seriously into our character to take on the fruit of the Spirit, right? So one of the worries is that we're not going to be able to trust the information that's out there. And we're not going to be able to trust AI because it hallucinates. Well, we're also not going to then be able to trust the people that are using AI to produce products for us as well. One of the reasons is we've lost sight of the fact that in order to come to know and represent the world as it is, you have to have a kind of character that actually cherishes what is true. Who's gotten upset about like something not being represented as being true? It's not always common. We want to learn to become the kind of people, again, like Christ, that cherished what was true and become the kind of people that can sit. And the issue will be the way that the CCPL is set up, the kind of people we are will set us up for the kind of politics we're going to have. The same thing is here true. The kind of people that we are is going to set up for us the kind of technological society we're going to have. You can say no to some of these things. It seems inevitable, but we can say no to some of these things. But we have to have something in its place, which I think is so wonderful about your work. We have to have something in its place. We can be very good about saying this is bad, don't do it. But we have to have something in its place, right? And that's where it's going to be formation into the image of Christ, where we can be the kind of people where you don't need an AI boyfriend or girlfriend. You don't need an AI therapist. The statistics came out, 50% of teenagers in the United States use AI that treats them, or they treat it like a friend. This came out, I think, 6 weeks ago. In the UK, it's down a little bit less. It's a little bit lower, but in some of the reports, they were saying, I have nowhere else to go. I have nowhere else to go. I've got to go to the AI as a companion app. And that industry is marketed to accelerate billions and billions of dollars up until 30. I don't have the statistics, so I don't want to misrepresent it, but I think it's like $23 billion by 2033, I think. Now, can you stand in the gap and love and care for people? I think so.
So I do want to leave some time for questions, so that time is now. And you guys have been very active in the question space, the app. Here I am looking at my phone like a millennial. So gross. Anyway, let's take this. So we're talking about kids. Let's talk about the kids. How do we teach the younger generation about AI when we are still figuring it out ourselves? So here's a more concrete. Who do we read and listen to learn more about teaching kids about AI? So let me just say, you should read Brandon's stuff. Just search his name on Google. Full of wisdom there. You should read Molly's reports at the Brookings Institution. And then you've got something that's just on the horizon as well. So all the three
But
people on the
specifically
stage.
for kids, there's two people I'd really recommend if you're really worried about kids. Isabel Howe from Stanford is brilliant. She,
How do you spell her last name?
I think it's H-A-U.
H-A-U.
She runs a center at Stanford where she's really focused on AI and kids. She just wrote a book. She's brilliant. Rebecca Winthrop at Brookings is our expert who's really thinking about AI and kids. Had a great Ezra Klein episode. Those are two. They're both prolific on LinkedIn. So you can, if you follow them, they like lots of other accounts. But Common Sense Media is another nonprofit that's been doing some great work on kids. But those would be my top three.
Common Sense Media was the one that put the study out that I was referring to. They do great.
Terrifying. Terrifying results.
When people ask often to a person working cancer, like, what diet should we eat so we don't get cancer? And I always tell people, it's what your grandma told you, right? To exercise, eat common sense food, right? And I think a lot of the teaching for how we deal with AI is very, very similar to the traditional teachings there, right? Andy Crouch's book is helpful, right? Takes away life, but a lot of the thing we think about is what
TechWise Family.
Yeah, TechWise Family is what AI enables are shortcuts that can make life so much easier, right? Life is hard. Relationships are hard, right? And to sort of work out relationships with people, it's hard. So then if you can have a relationship, a synthetic one, it makes it, there's a lot of temptations there. So, we always talk about, big dopamine hits, right? But it's not just dopamine anymore. It's serotonin, this sort of relationship. So I think, again, also with sort of CCPL is the importance of spiritual formation is ever more important when the temptations are looming and at the touch of a keyboard, right? So I would think that a lot of the wisdom is going to be the same ones that have sort of maintained us for thousands of years.
How can I monetize that and put it in an app? Grandma.ai, not going to be a good app.
The Jesus GPT.
That's already a thing.
I know, Faith GPT, Jesus GPT, all those GPT domain names were bought up within instance of all the GPT. So again, I think I would encourage schools will have their sort of specific ways of how to sort of use it. But I think, again, the grounding of spiritual formation, character building, what it means to be a man and woman of God is going to be the same things that has, Jesus taught for thousands of years.
So I think
Actually,
one
Brandon,
way to put that.
we're short on time, so I just want to make sure that we get some more questions here. So one thing we didn't talk about, but that I'd love to hear you guys talk about is from our following next question. How do you reconcile kind of the environmental, how do we think about the environmental impact of AI, especially water, electricity usage? We were talking just about, power bills and things like that. So how do we think about, because care of creation, also kind of real important value. Yeah, what do you guys think?
Not in my wheelhouse.
Not in your wheelhouse. You don't know.
My personal point of view is there's a big debate raging whether or not AI is going to be the cure for climate change. There's some people who strongly believe that we're not going to be able to cure climate change until AI is smart enough to figure this out. So we could be, in the short run, having lots of terrible environmental impacts. In the long run, it's going to get solved. I have no way to know whether or not that's true, just putting it out there. The way I think about it is trying to be careful about how I'm using AI, knowing there is an environmental impact. I think any effort to cure cancer, by all means, let's go. I'm horrified by OpenAI's release of Sora, which is just video slop. It's going to take up so much energy. Sam Altman's announcement that they're now allowing pornography. I can't imagine the volume of horrible things plus, environmental impact. So I think frivolous for me, I just make personal choices. If I feel like this is something as best I can that seems to not be frivolous, and just being a little bit careful of that. But I think from an academic question, there's just an unresolved debate about where this is all going and whether AI, ultimately, some of this usage is going to be part of the solution that I can't answer.
I used a lot of compute.
Yeah. You're solving cancer. It's not frivolous. It's not Sora.
I think, yeah, it's going to take a lot of power. And I don't know whether, I think, how do we steward that use for the right means?
Yeah.
Just practically, there was an article that came out, don't say thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Just saying thank you
that stays.
eats up energy. Yeah, don't say thank you. Don't say please.
So speak of Sam Altman and he will appear. Our next question is, I asked ChatGPT to give me a question for the panel. And it gave me this. In what ways can Christian ethical teachings inform the development and deployment of AI technologies, particularly in areas like privacy, justice, and we've talked a lot about human dignity, but let's talk about it some more.
So we created the Center for Ethical Intelligence, really to help start thinking about what that is right now a lot of sort of the AI labs, again, are creating these models, and what they're measuring are capabilities. How good can it solve math IMO problems, or how good can it code, or how could, there's a vendor bench, it gives it ownership of a vending machine and see how much money it can make, right? So, and there's some description of sort of morality and what it looks like. And even today, there's a moral bench that some of the people from Scale AI come up with. But there's not really robust computer science interaction with philosophers and ethicists in a way to sort of create an area to think about what that looks like in terms of a measurement of morality there. It seems oxymoronic, like how can you measure it? But ultimately you still need to measure it somehow there. So they're starting to be increasing sort of literature there, and we hope to sort of increase in that conversation of, you know what, there's great things from, for example, the Delta framework, but then how do you, if there's dignity, how do you measure dignity? How do you operationalize it? What does it mean in terms of code, and how to bridge the gap between philosophers and ethicists and theologians and computer scientists there. So I think this work still needs to sort of come together, and we're hopefully one of the voices that try to do that.
Anyone else want to add on this particular question?
I would say, I think there's a conversation about how do we embed ethical principles in technology decisions or in technology design. I think there's a parallel conversation that needs to happen about what are sort of ethical principles that can get enshrined in a societal response to the technology. It might not be in the technology. And one of the reasons why I was so excited to be at the Vatican last week is that the title of our seminar was the Digital Rerum Novarum for an AI age. And for those of you familiar with the original Rerum Novarum, which was this extremely influential papal encyclical that the last Pope Leo put out during the Second Industrial Revolution, that really formed the basis of Catholic social teaching, but it also catalyzed incredibly important social and political reforms across Europe and the US for things like child labor laws, unions, safety, expectations of employers on fair pay. I think there's a really exciting question right now, which is, what is a Rerum Novarum today for the AI age? What are the sort of societal reforms, rules, guardrails, institutions, mechanism that's going to bend this in ways that uphold our Christian values, whether it's for our kids, for the dignity of work, for privacy, for any of the questions raised. That's not going to sit just in the tech companies. I think that's a societal and a political response. And I think it's a really exciting question that I hope is not just a Catholic Rerum Novarum waiting for the Vatican to put out an essay, but really a call to action of Christians across the board to ask those big questions and turn that into a coherent message to Washington, to governors, to society, to say this is what we need to see.
So we have about 3 minutes left. There are three of you. do the math. You guys have got about 1 minute. What is like the one takeaway, the precious jewel that you want members in our audience to leave this auditorium with on this subject?
I'll start. Does anybody watch VeggieTales? Right?
Come on, it's
This
audience full of
is my
Christians.
nugget. God is greater than the boogeyman. Right? So we're fearing AI. We're thinking, oh no, right? I think next year, $500 billion of spending in CapEx, billion, right? This is crazy, right? But we worship a God, right? Who owns cattle on 1,000 hills. The whole universe is under his sovereignty and control. That always sort of grounds me and sort of think about how this is such a big problem. So again, with kids, think God is bigger than human.
I think I would want to leave with the note that I think AI is full of peril and promise, and left to our own devices as society, I don't think it's going to end well. And I think Christian ethics, Christian tradition, 2,000 years of church history, all of that is, I think, essential moral compass for where we should steer. And I think it's really up to the community to come together to give a North Star that's grounded in ethics that can help guide us individually, family level, but also really importantly at the policy level as well.
I can't come up with anything more brilliant than one of my mentors, and he said there's no problem in human history that can't be worked at and solved by spiritual formation. That's just it, right? So in the hands of people that love Christ, AI won't be a problem, in the same way that in the hands of those that love Christ and are like him, pornography won't be a problem. It's just not going to be something they're interested in. So the resources that Christ has for us are the exact sort of thing that can carry us through this moment and help us love our neighbors in a way that the kinds of threat about AI are not going to be as big of an issue, right? And so that, and then I would say too, get very specific. The discussion about AI is too vague to be helpful, and sin lives in vagueness. So you want to talk about an intimacy app, right? Is it good to have an app that you've got a relationship with?
No.
Right.
Is it?
Now you might think, now I've been talking about that for 7 years and everyone thought I was crazy. I get pastors now asking me questions, does it count as adultery?
Probably.
It's a real issue. But you want to talk about that specifically, right? You want to talk about cancer research specifically. Is the AI application of that specific? AI functions as a myth in many ways. Just the term carries weight like a myth does. Handle it that way, I think.
Well, I think that's a great note, very edifying note. I mean, fear not. It's a very common phrase in the Bible. So we've got agency. We can be confident that empowered by the Holy Spirit and being spiritually well-formed, this is a problem we can really help make solutions for. So with that, let's thank our panelists for an amazing discussion.